Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's a different angle, isn't it? Well, it's great to have everybody here on a Tuesday morning. And I did a little bit of an announcement on this on Facebook, but haven't promoted this live stream otherwise. This is going to be part three of walking folks through the process of doing a deeper service, a deeper optimization on a 201-2. And it's interesting, last night, fairly late, I got a text from Emma. All of you know Emma. I got a text from Emma, and I don't even think she knew that I was going to be presenting part three of the 201-2, but she had come across an article. Let's see here. Emma writes she was looking for some info on the Singer 201-2, and she ran into an article where there are two pictures that would have been shown on this channel. And they were from the earlier YouTube days on this channel. And it's by a group called steamit.com. See if I can show it to you. Not sure if that's focusing or not. There it is. But when you hit this link, the title of this article, let's see, the title of this article is "One of My Two Leather Sewing Machines, Singer 201-2, and a Tipman Boss Hand Stitcher." And very, very different machines. I'm not quite sure why this person is, apart from the fact that they both can sew leather, I'm not sure why this person is showing these two machines. But you read through a brief little narrative where they reference the fact that this machine was called the Rolls-Royce of singers, since the Rolls-Royce company used this model to do all the leather work for their cars. Well, this person is trying to restate something that they heard on this channel. The fact that about 13, 14 years ago, I announced for the first time anywhere in the world that Rolls-Royce and Singer had partnered, and that the Rolls-Royce sewing machine company had used the 201 on a limited basis to sew the interior leather panels. Those are the door panels on the cars, not necessarily the seats, but the door panels for sure. And so they're making a broad statement They obviously didn't watch the video real carefully on my channel. And then they proceed from there to show a general picture of a 201-2. And then they actually use two screenshots directly from the Cow Country YouTube channel. This is when I first announced the 201-2 was used by Rolls-Royce probably 13, 14 years ago. And they took a screenshot or a still shot somehow of it, of me actually holding the pictures of the interior of a Rolls-Royce. And they posted it within their article, not giving any credit to Cow Country at all. And then another one here where I'm sewing off on canvas binding tape, and probably did about 8 to 10 layers of it, again on a 201-2. And they're showing that on this article as if it's something that they've done. You know what? I don't get overly bent out of whack about something like this, but common courtesy would say that if you're going to use somebody's stuff, at least make mention that you did it, so that folks know that it's not something that you originated. And I tried to write a response to this last night, and apparently you have to sign up with them to do it. So it's kind of a limited scope. But if anyone wants to look it up on a curiosity, I can see about posting the link in the live stream somehow, maybe. See if I can do that. But I just wanted to bring that up since this random text that came from Emma last night relating to the 201-2 related directly to this live stream today. So I'm going to see what I can do as far as posting this. I don't know if I'm going to be successful or not. I don't think I'm going to be successful. It's probably going to be too many letters. But I hope everybody's been doing well. And we're going to be covering a couple of things in this live stream today. We're going to be actually sewing off on this 201-2 that is finished, and it's going to be packed up this week and heading to Nevada. And then I'm going to be demonstrating some stuff on this other 201 down at the end of this other workbench, some of it which relates to part 3 that I talked about doing. And then also I'm going to do an additional brief demonstration of setting up a foot controller for success. Teresa from I'm blanking, Thorpe, Wisconsin, requested that I kind of go into the foot control a little bit and talk about doing some calibration on that and some setup on that. And so we're going to try to cover that briefly in this live stream as well. Give me 1 second. I got to respond to something real quick that's okay. Had to provide a quick response that was time sensitive. So let's get right into this live stream. Again, it's going to be a bit of a tutorial, and then also have a little bit of an element of going back to our old format of running through a mini sew-off testing field of materials on this 201-2 that was just finished. And I don't have all of my materials with me, so it's going to be a condensed version of that. It's going to be a condensed version. Let me actually go to the live stream announcement and see if I can quickly post that link so you can look at that that article that was written about 6 years ago about the 201-2.
Attention viewers, we are sorry to interrupt your show, but we just received a call from our representatives, and they told us that the 5,002.
I might as well do a quick audio check while I'm here. Testing 1 2. Testing. Testing, testing, testing. Yeah, we're streaming real well today. He keeps repeating everything I say. I'll turn the volume down. Okay, I'm going to try to go to the live chat. See if I can do that. And I'll post that link real quick in case you want to check that out. I think I did it right, hopefully. Okay, I just posted it. Hopefully it popped in. Yeah, I think it did. I think it popped in. And since I'm over here right now, I'm going to quickly say good morning to everyone. And then we'll jump into this live stream. Let's see here. Open that up. Okay, I think I did it right. All right, I'm going to set that over there. And I'll quickly go down and just say some good mornings to folks. Let's see here. Well, no surprise, Susie was the first in the classroom today. She does have a little bit of an advantage because she knew that the live stream was going to be coming this morning, although I announced it on Facebook, so everyone knew pretty much. And she has to jump into the live stream when it goes live like everyone else. She's just very fast. She's very, very fast. And it looks like Erin Allen was just on her heels. Erin Allen from the beautiful state of Vermont. So Erin almost beat her, but not quite. Not quite. Let's see who else we have. We've got Emma as well. I've got to move this camera a little bit. I'm leaning in and I'm kind of getting my chin in the way. Ah, it looks like Emma joined us as well, and she's heading for a mountain. She's heading for a mountain. No idea. Maybe she'll share a little bit more details about where she's traveling. There's not a lot of mountains down in Florida, but possibly she's traveling somewhere outside of Florida. Also, good morning to Alex and his wife from the great state of California, aka Al Koss. Let's see who else we have. Kathy P. Core from the great state of Wisconsin. Great to have Kathy P. Core as part of that as well. And Kathy, you might remember, has ties to Oconto. Her family is one of the founding families of Oconto, and she won a contest a while back and stepped away with a beautiful 170th anniversary Singer Class 15 hand crank machine. You might remember that. Otherwise, you can go back and look at it because she drove all the way in from somewhere near Madison. I think it was about 3.5 hours. And it looks like we also have Ren here this morning. I don't remember, is Ren from Texas or where is Ren from? R-E-N. Let's see here. And I think that's everybody in the live stream right now. Everyone that's in the live chat, I should say. Oh, okay. That's Renee. Renee changed her screen name. That's Renee from Oconto. Renee from Oconto. Duh. I'll get it right. We have a couple of folks from outside of the US as well that use a real short screen name similar to that. So I wasn't sure if that was someone from the US or from somewhere else. So yeah. And Ren is not new. Ren is not new, Susie, to the Cow Country family. She's been following us and been with us for a while. She donated the diamond art to one of our last contests, and she's also the one day where I didn't have a Diet Coke, she swung by the old workshop and put 2 Diet Cokes, giant sized Diet Cokes, on the front steps of the workshop, and I popped out and grabbed them during the live stream. So yeah, Ren, aka Renee, has been a part of the family for quite some time now. So it's great to have Renee here from Oconto. Hello to Jenny as well, our ambassador to Needles. And Jenny also shared in a recent live stream a picture of her setup in her living room or somewhere in her home, where she had a big screen TV as a backdrop, and then she had her 201-2 set up, and she was going step by step as I went through the different processes on the machine. So I'm guessing she's going to join again today after viewing the first and the second chapter of the 201-2, and probably doing some additional work on her 201-2 during this live stream for part 3. And I believe she's got 201-2s, 2 of them. I think she has 2 201-2s. It's a little bit tricky to say. So yeah, let's go over to the other machine first, because I want to show you some stuff, and then we'll launch into sewing with this one here. Okay, so I'm going to step away from the laptop, bring this over this way. See if I'm hopefully able to do this. My cable's kind of in a weird way. I hope I don't knock anything off. Okay, so we've got a 201-2 over here that is from the same general area as Kathy P. Core. Let's see if I can do this. This 201-2 is from the Madison, greater Madison, Wisconsin area. And I'm right in the middle of working on this one right now, and I kind of stopped so that I could show you some things on this machine today and cover them to kind of finish out on part 3 a little bit better. The first thing I wanted to show you is we're going to be focusing on a foot controller. Teresa out of Thorpe, Wisconsin, asked me to talk a little bit more about the foot controller, kind of setting it up for success, etc. A big part of that is having it wired properly and having the correct type of wiring. You can see, I think in the shot, you can see the stark contrast between these 2 wires right here. The one on the left, if you look at it, is going to be 18 gauge wire. The one on the right here is going to be 16 gauge. If you're doing any rewiring on your machines, you want to make sure that if you use the 18 gauge, that it's only used inside of the motor. It can be used to go between the stators and the stack lamentations. You can go from the stators up to the carbon brushes as well. It's going to be able to carry a load of right around, there's debate on it, but right around 2 amps. So it's going to be able to support the electrical operation of the motor internally very well, but it doesn't provide a big enough gateway to be used on the foot controllers. There are people I've seen that are using 18 gauge, even 20 gauge wire to wire foot controllers. It's not a good idea because, again, the foot controller is your gateway to the motor to power the machine, and you've got to have as big of a gateway as possible so that there's no hesitation, there's no hindrance of that electricity passing through the foot controller into the motor. So I strongly recommend using 16 gauge wire, which is this one right here. And if you look at look at the wires side by side again, they stand out very obviously different. Part of that is the wire itself. The other part is the insulation. the insulation on the 16 gauge is going to be a lot more dense because it can carry up to about 3 amps. And so they've got to provide better insulation to protect the wire and to protect the operator as well. That's really the insulation factor when it comes to wires. So the machine that we're going to be looking at today that was in the shot earlier, that's going to be heading back to Nevada, that originally was wired with a hodgepodge of wires. It had 20 gauge wire, it had 18 gauge wire, and someone had really tried to go at it and do some wiring on the machine, but they just had a mixture of both types of wiring, and it really doesn't serve the machine well. It doesn't optimize it. So again, on machines, if you do wiring, if you're doing wiring in a motor, 18 gauge is fine. If you're doing wiring between the foot controller and the machine, or the foot controller and the motor, stick with 16 gauge. And you don't need to go any lower than that. It's unnecessary, because these machines are going to be 0.5, 0.6 amp. They're going to peak at about 0.7, 0.8 amp. They're not going to need wiring beyond 16 gauge. And if you're not familiar with the gauge structure for electrical wiring, and you go into your hardware store so you can be equipped with a little bit more knowledge, the lower the number, the higher the wire count, and the denser the insulation is going to be on that wiring. So in other words, in layman's terms, the lower the number, the thicker that wire is going to be, the heavier load that it can carry. And really, for our purposes with sewing machines, we don't need to go any lower than 16 gauge. I mean, it doesn't serve any purpose at all. So let's go into this foot controller and take a little bit closer look at the innards of it. If you've never taken your foot controller apart before, unplug your machine and open it up and check it out. You'll be amazed what you find in here. I've found everything from dead bugs to pet hair to every kind of version and flavor of dirt that God ever made. So you'll be surprised sometimes when you open a foot controller just how filthy it is. And again, being the gateway for electricity to the machine, you've got to do a good job of regularly servicing your foot controller, especially if you have pets, or you're in an environment that's a little bit more dusty, or if you're located near an area in your home where, say, there's cooking grease and other things like that. All of that's going to get pulled into the machine, foot controller, and the motor. So you'll want to service that regularly. But let's open this up first of all. You can use a standard screwdriver. That's absolutely fine. Or you can use a power screwdriver. Either one will work nicely. And just take out these 4 screws that hold the pads and the bottom of the foot controller together. I think I will use my power screwdriver. It's a little bit faster. I don't have my regular magnet, so I was going to try to use the magnet of this light to pull these screws out. Apparently it's not a strong enough magnetic field. Let's see if I can just pull these out. And most of you already know this answer. It's pretty basic, but does anyone want to type in the live chat what size motor, and I mentioned it already, what size motor the 201-2 is going to come with, and what the amperage tolerance is of this foot controller that we're opening up right now. It's always good to revisit those things so that we've got that in our pocket as far as information about the equipment that we're using with our machines. And these little rubber pads right here just give a cushion and keep the foot controller from sliding, you can just pull those off as well. We're going to be cleaning those also before we put this back together. Yeah, we're getting a little bit of stuff falling out of this one already. So we just took our little pads off. We took our screws out. We'll set those right in the back. We'll set this to the back right now as well. And then we're going to look inside of here and see what kind of goodies we found. All kinds of lint and debris inside of the foot controller. Up here, we've got a little cobweb, maybe a little spider egg in there. Who knows? But it gives you an idea for a closed space. I mean, when this is put together, it's fairly tight, right? But all of this stuff can still work its way in because this little button that we push has just enough clearance as it's being pushed up and down to let a lot of stuff into this foot controller. So doing regular maintenance on this, I would say probably depending on your setup and your environment, doing this twice a year might not be a bad idea. And right now we can grab some of the bigger stuff out of here. We'll get the spider eggs out to begin with, and then we'll go after some of this other debris as well. And I'm going to hit this with just a little bit of Windex and just kind of wipe it down. And again, you can take this little button out right here so you can service it even better. I'll move my wiring out of the way as well. We don't need this right now. So we're just wiping all the dirt off and getting a nice clean environment for that foot controller. And then we're going to focus on the foot controller itself and get that tidied up as well. I'm also going to use my my little nylon brush to get into some of these little nooks and crannies, break some of that dirt free. I would say the majority of sewists out there probably have never ever opened their foot controller. They've never even been inside of it. And some let's face it, some foot controllers are a little bit more cumbersome to open up, especially some of the newer electronic ones. They don't make it easy to get into those things at all. They make it very difficult, as a matter of fact. So we're just doing a tidying up, cleaning up in here. Get all that extra dirt out of those little crevices and corners that you can see we can get out of there. Okay, I think we did a good job. Looks a lot different than when we started. Now let's focus on this other part of the foot controller. Certainly this button, will do a quick cleaning on that as well. And you can get an idea of the gateway to get all that dirt in there. You can see the edges of this foot controller button is just absolutely coated in filth. Just absolutely coated in dirt and filth. And again, what that's going to do is that's going to contaminate that foot controller and make it less effective as the gateway. Do a little bit of cleaning in here as well, get this kind of cleaned up. All right, we'll set that to the side with this portion right here, which we've already gone over and cleaned up. Now let's look at this end of the foot controller, the mechanical side of things. We'll take this. This is the old wiring that was on here. It's becoming really brittle and rigid, and that should be your signal that you want to change this out. And you'll notice that on these original foot controllers that came out of the factory, they've got an additional barrier right here that runs up to right about there, from here to there. That's because foot controllers generate heat, and they added this extra field of insulation to try to protect that wiring so that down here at this point, it wouldn't become brittle prematurely. And we have a contemporary version of this that we can certainly add when this foot controller is rewired. And I'll show that to you. We'll go ahead and take this old wiring off first because it's definitely past its expiration. And there was nothing wrong necessarily with the old wiring. It's just that the coatings that they used then and also the wiring insulation on the inside was a little bit more susceptible to getting brittle than it is now, especially down here. If you were to bend these, you can actually feel that insulation coating underneath basically cracking. It's basically cracking underneath here because of that heat factor. The electricity generates heat, and then also heat gets retained inside of the foot controller as well. So that's going to go in the garbage for now. Put those in there. Now, as you're looking at the foot controller, it's fairly simple. Really, what it does is it acts like a rheostat, and it acts like a light switch. It's probably a horrible description, but it acts like a rheostat because by adjusting this up and down, it allows you to regulate the speed and the flow of electricity going from the foot controller into the motor. But it's also like a light switch because what it does, what its real function is to simply complete a circuit. It's like connecting two wires together to allow that motor to run. So that's why sometimes I've been contacted by folks that haven't watched the videos carefully as I talk about the zones on these singers, zones 1, 2, and 3. And I've talked about how to wire a foot control properly. In some instances, people have wired the foot controller incorrectly. They've wired it to the hot zones of 1 and 3, which all of you know because you're really smart. 1 and 3 is strictly reserved for a continuous flow of electricity that supports the lighting system on the machine. So you would never want to connect a foot controller there. And what happens is if you make the mistake of wiring the foot controller to zones 1 and 3, and you then depress this, it completes the circuit, and it's the equivalent of sticking a metal object into an outlet, if you can imagine. It grounds it out, and it causes a short, and usually that surge will come into the foot controller and destroy this ceramic base that's essential to the operation of it. So, be real careful. Be real careful when you're working with electricity, obviously. So I'm going to talk about the basics of this. One of the easiest ways to check to see if your foot controller is calibrated within a reasonable range is when it's at a resting point. In other words, when this is at a resting point and it's not being depressed, this should just be this little plate right here should just about be flush with the edges of this ceramic. You don't want it deeply recessed like that, and you don't want it sticking out further because then your regulation of speed is going to be limited. The real important thing to guard against, because everyone can see there's a screw on there, right? You can see there's a screw on there, and all of us are inclined when we see screws on a sewing machine anywhere to tighten them, right? And if you over tighten this screw on here, what it does is it presses this down and it opens the circuit up on the foot controller. So in other words, if I take a screwdriver like this and I turn this like I am right now, turning it, And you can see now, instead of being flush with the edge, it's recessed down probably about 1.5 millimeters. If this gets pushed down too far, as it would be in normal operation, this is me operating it right now. If this gets pushed down too far by screwing this screw in, what it does is it leaves that electrical channel open. And it would be the equivalent of superheating something by pushing it down, but not allowing that electricity to discharge. That's the reason foot controllers heat up, is because they've got that electrical charge in them, but the electricity is not escaping to the motor. And what happens then is that electricity will build up in the foot controller, and it can build up to an extent where it can actually cause these components to break down and to even melt, and can actually burst into flames. So when you're adjusting this, if you get a foot controller and let's say that it's well above, let's say it's well above, you can see now where it's above the surface of that ceramic portion right there. There we go. Now you can see it. Then you can carefully bring this back down so that it's flush, but not any lower than that, or you're going to risk having that circuit left open. There's actually been house fires caused by that. And you can kind of push on it a little bit just to check to see that it's popping up. And it's going to be flush right with that edge. It's pretty close. Probably a couple more turns will get us down just about right. That's a little bit too low. That's pretty doggone close. That's going to be real close to where we want it. A couple of other things on the front of this, and you can see this one is really dirty right now. It hasn't been cleaned yet. But there's going to be some other adjusting points on here as well. Depending on the distance of this to these copper contact points, you can take a small wrench and you can actually push this further forward by screwing it forward and get it a little bit closer to these flanges. You can also adjust the bend on these flanges as well. These flanges right here are the copper contacts that you can see coming right off of here. And they should be bent in slightly, probably at about a 20-degree angle, so that as you're depressing the foot controller and it's closing that field, it's going to come into contact with those at the end of the depression of that foot controller. I've seen some that are adjusted so poorly that you've got it all the way down and it's not even coming up to contact with these, and that's why that person isn't getting full power. So you can, this is a pretty malleable metal, copper is, so you can bend it in just slightly. What I normally use is I'll use something like a needle nose. If the bend is not at the right angle, these are a little bit bulkier. I think I'll use my other ones. And you can just gently give them a little bit of a bend. And this is obviously with the machine unplugged. Give them a little bit of a bend in. Yeah, that's about right. The other thing that happens over time, and it seems like a minor thing, but it really isn't, is these springs that allow this to return back to the original setting, these springs will slip down. Right now, these springs are in the wrong position. You can see they're down here on the bottom. I'm guessing if you open your foot controller, you're probably going to find that they're down here as well. And what I use to bring those back up, see if I can find it. I usually use a little dental tool like this, kind of get underneath the edge, bring them back up to the edge as best as you can. You have to kind of wiggle, jiggle them a little bit. Sometimes by hand is even easier. You get under the edge there. Somebody may have crimped these down a little bit. They may have pinched those in so that it's harder to slide up that little connection shaft there. There we go. Starting to get it, I think. And you can see there's actually a little notch built right into this. that allows that spring loop to lock in there. But over time, pushing it back and forth, they tend to work themselves loose and they fall down. And that will also restrict how much power you can get out of your machine, because it's not allowing that to be pulled quite as far, and it's not giving that return action so that you're getting that completely back to its original position and you don't have any open circuit. So we'll just do that to both sides as well. Kind of walk it up that little shaft. That one worked a lot easier. So this is the proper position. Get those into the proper position on top of this arm. Now we're going to do some general cleanup on here. I'm also going to use a polisher to polish up this copper on here to make sure that these contacts are nice and clean. Same thing on this side. And there's a much deeper service to this foot controller that I could show you. I don't know that I'll do it today, but if you totally remove this screw, there's going to be 2 chambers on either side of the foot controller right here. There's 2 chambers of carbon discs. They're wafer thin, and there's a stack of about 50 on both sides. And those will generate dust over time, and that also will cause the foot controller to run much hotter. And it's a little bit of a laborious process, but maybe I'll do that on another live stream, or if you really bug me about it during this live stream, I'll do it now. I'll show you how to open those up. It's not too tricky, but servicing those is really, really critical to the maintenance schedule on one of these carbon-based foot controllers, so that that foot controller runs as cool as it possibly can. You can also take the ceramic part off for deeper cleaning. You just take these 2 screws out right here. Well, let's focus on cleaning it up right now, just to do the basics right now, and then we'll see if we decide we want to go deeper than that. And again, you can use a number of different agents. You can use a number of different agents to clean something like this. You can use rubbing alcohol in certain portions to eat away at the junk that's on there. You can use kerosene. As you saw in that earlier live stream, kerosene has a very high flash point. So even though this is electrically charged, it's safe to use within that electrical field. I would just let it dry out a little bit. Get that tidied up over here a little bit more. And now what I'm going to use a pair of tweezers and a cotton ball. You can either use a cotton ball or you can use one of these cosmetic pads. Either one will work fine. And we just want to use it to kind of dig into those little spaces that we just treated to get that extra dirt off of there. And most people wouldn't think about it, but there are lubrication points on a foot controller too. There are lubrication points. I'll show you where those are. That will increase the operation of the foot controller, make it a little bit more efficient. So you can see with only a little bit of effort, we made a big impact in servicing and getting this foot controller back to a much better operating state than it was before. And I'll give you the short version of it on the live stream just so we can move on to some other things as well. So lubrication points. Let's look at lubrication points on this real quick. They're obvious, aren't they? It's the pivot points. So right here, as we're looking at the foot controller, we've got pivot points. I'll actually use it with the syringe to point at as we're depressing it. We got pivot points up here on either side. We've got pivot points here, down in that area right there on both sides. We want to make sure we get some lubrication in there. And I would recommend only using kerosene as far as a lubricant on the foot controller because of that lasting effect of lubrication, the rust inhibiting, and also the fact that it's got a very high flash point. So I'm just putting a little bit of lubricant in here, right in there. Trying to get close enough so you can see. And over here, and then up on here as well. And that just allows this to flow that much easier and to do its job. Now cleaning up the copper contacts, we're going to use a Dremel to do that. It's going to be a little bit easier to get the job done. We've got to change the Dremel brush from this broom style one to the smaller one so we can get in there and clean those up a little bit. And then what we'll do is we'll clean over those afterwards using some rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip swab. And I would go fairly low on the RPMs, just enough to get her spinning. And with this type of, I didn't show you it clearly enough, with this type of a brush here, it's kind of a compressed broom style. It's going to get into those tight spaces a lot easier and get it cleaned up very nicely. Clean both sides of those copper contacts. And also this contact point as well. Now we're just going to take some Q-tip swabs with some rubbing alcohol, and we'll go ahead and clean those areas up because as soon as you buff it, you're basically breaking that debris loose. And if you don't remove that debris, you haven't done much good. It's almost like sweeping a floor both directions instead of sweeping it in one direction and then collecting it up in a dustpan. You're just moving the dirt around. You're not getting rid of the dirt. So we want to break it free, and then we want to go in here and we want to clean those contact points and get any of that loose debris off. And again, I'll just say it, if you joined a little bit late, this is always, always, always with the machine disconnected from any power source. Never open a foot controller and try to service it when that machine is energized. I've had people that have contacted me from around the world that said they didn't know that they could get shocked off of a foot controller. Well, with it being the gateway to electricity, one would think that they would connect the dots on that, but some folks, they just don't. You can see with little effort what we just got off of that one from all that debris we broke loose. And that's all going to inhibit the flow of electricity through that foot controller to that motor. So we're optimizing this foot controller right now so that it'll serve that motor even better. Cleaning the copper contacts, and we can wipe over all the contacts of that foot controller, try to get rid of all that dirt so that it's not going to be there as a source to contaminate that foot controller anytime soon. But again, if you've got pets, if you have your sewing space set up near a window where there tends to be a lot of dust, maybe you live out in the country and there's dirt roads, realize you'll have to do this more often than folks that might be in a city setting. that they won't be as exposed to some of those elements as much as you out in the country. So just kind of cleaning over this again, making sure it's tidied up, getting all those contacts. You can also clean these as well. These are not copper, but that's where those electrical leads are going to connect. And I could probably change this out right about now. Look at, with a little bit of wiping that we've done, already we've gotten a lot of filth off of that foot controller, haven't we? And we've only made a few adjustments to it. I'm going to look at the live chat right now and see if folks are wanting me, because I don't have a huge number of sew-offs to do on the machine going back to Nevada, because I don't have all of my materials in this temporary workshop. But if someone wants me to open this up and try to go a little bit deeper to show you those carbon stacks that are built inside of these, I can try to do that. I'll see if we can do it. I'll see what the feedback is. Oh, looks like Tim is here as well. Hello to Tim. Hello to Tim. And Emma's saying she'd like us to open it up. So see if we can do that real quick. And I shouldn't say real quick, because it's not a real quick process. And I know I covered this in another live stream. I might have covered it. Let me actually get a clean towel. I might have covered it in still shots. It's been quite some time ago. It's been quite some time ago. And I'm actually going to just take this off. It's probably going to make it much easier in the long run. And for sake of time, kind of like on that, putting the pedestal feet back on that other 201, I'll show you how to get in here, but I may not go through the entire process of putting it back together again. We'll see how much time we have. So you saw me take this little cutter key pin off. It just slides over here and it locks it in place on this part of the foot controller. That way we can deal with just with this part here without having to fumble around with all the rest of this. But now we also have access to cleaning this area, should we choose to do that, with just basically removing this cotter pin and these two bolts. We now can remove this entire assembly and get in on these areas as well. And you can see it's kind of dirty underneath there, isn't it? Kind of yucky. So we'll see if we can tidy that up a little bit as well. And these are just little insulation buffers. They're not asbestos. They're going to be made out of another type of material. And it just creates a little bit of a cushion, a little bit of a heat barrier from this sitting against the plastic. So we'll set those to the side as well. I'll set this back there. Set our little cotter pin back there. Yeah, it's fun to look at this way, isn't it? It's kind of fun. Okay, let's see if we can get this out, and then we'll open up these little chambers, see if we can get into there as well. And I haven't done this for a while, so I may be a little bit of a bumbler. Hopefully not too much. There, almost got it out. Getting closer anyway. Yeah, I think we'll. Yeah, let's change the size of that bit. That bit's a little bit too small. Hopefully this one isn't too wide. Yeah, sometimes it's easier to do it by hand, isn't it? I think I'll do that. Those power drills are really nice, but they can spin too much sometimes and make it really difficult to control. Make it very, very difficult to control. There we go. You can actually get to it right here even without without taking this all the way off. Probably. Oh, that's going to have a different anchoring point on it, isn't it? These change over time, and sometimes they would make them a lot more difficult to get into. We'll see what we can do to get this open so we can take a look at those. Most of them are going to have screws right on the side of here where you can remove those caps. These actually appear to be anchored in a different way, so we may have a little bit more trouble getting that out. I'll do my best. Like I said, it's a time-consuming process, but periodically it's a good thing to do. Let's see if that little rubber boot will come off without taking that section off. I may have to prepare for this one. Getting those screws out. The screws are actually on this side right here. It's going to be a little bit of a pain to get those out. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we save this for another live stream because it's going to take a little bit more time than I think we have. But underneath these two little rubber boots right here, there's going to be a chamber of wafer-sized carbon discs. They're going to run just from around right there all the way down to right about there. There's about 50 in each side. And what I'll do is I'll present this in a live stream, maybe on Saturday. We'll concentrate just on getting these components out. I don't want to rush and break anything because this is a customer's foot controller. But we'll work on servicing those and getting those released. It's as simple as getting to these screws, but these screws are really, really kind of awkward to reach right now. Yeah, they're really tight too. I might have to heat them up a little bit. So, but at any rate, we'll just say that this is part one of getting into the foot controller. Part two, we'll actually open these chambers up. We'll take those discs out and very, very carefully, they're very fragile, very carefully clean them. And then we'll reinsert them. And then we'll reassemble the foot controller in one of the next live streams. Okay. I'm not going to do it right now because I feel like I'm getting anxious and I don't want to break something. So, but for right now, we took it down quite a ways and we'll finish this process on the next live stream. I'll just set this to the rear. Let's move now from the foot controller. Set that back over there. Let's move now from the foot controller to the upper tension. It's something that I've already disassembled in preparation for this live stream. And I want to show you how to clean it. And I believe on the last one we focused on the raceway. I showed you how to break that down, how to reassemble it, and make sure that it's operating properly. Take the feed dogs off as well. Now let's focus on the upper tension, really a critical part of the machine, and it really is quite often neglected. So let's see if we can make an impact there as well. So if you've never seen a upper tension disassembled, this is what it looks like right here. All these various little parts, and we're going to go ahead and clean them, and we will reassemble it, and then you'll have the confidence to be able to do that with your machine as well. I've seen people try to do quick versions of it. They'll take little dental tools, or they'll take, in some cases, maybe dental floss, hopefully the unwaxed dental floss, and they'll come between the discs and they'll try to do a quick cleaning on them. There's so much you miss doing that. So we're going to do it the right way. And I think you'll see the difference right away as far as the depth of doing it. So we'll start with some of the parts that we're going to put back on first. This is going to be our adjuster plate right here for the take-up spring. You can see right now it needs a fair amount of attention, pretty filthy looking. We'll get this all cleaned up. We'll get it remounted to the machine, but we also have to prepare the surface of the machine as well. The surface of the machine right here has a lot of varnishing on it. We're going to see if we can clean that up fairly quickly using the Dremel tool. I'm going to change the Dremel bits again, though, and go to this blade style brush. It'll give us a little bit better control so we don't accidentally catch the paint. And again, we're going to do this on a low speed just because we want to have better control. So I'm going to turn this way down to about number 1, just slowly working over that, getting that surface clean. And it'll accelerate a little bit more as far as getting it clean if we add the magic sauce, not rubbing alcohol, but just a little bit of kerosene to that. And I'll actually put it on a swab on a cotton ball so we can kind of dab it on there a little bit more easily. And the reason we clean the mounting surface is because otherwise we're going to be putting a clean upper tension back on a dirty surface, and that doesn't make much sense, does it? Kind of dab that on a little bit, then apply that Dremel again. You notice I'm changing the angle of the Dremel so that I can have a little bit more control over where those bristles are hitting. We're going to switch to a broom style. We're going to try to go into that chamber right there and clean that out as well. And when you initially look at a brush style Dremel attachment and you look at it in circumference to that hole, you're like, how is it possible for that to go in there? But as it spins, the centrifugal force compresses those bristles a little bit, and it's amazing the spaces that you can fit something like this into. Hopefully we're able to do that today. And I can demonstrate that to you so you can see that it is a doable thing. Also, we'll put just a little bit of kerosene into that space as well to break down some of that crud that's in there. And we'll spin this up a little bit faster so we can get the benefit of that centrifugal force. You see our lighting is not too great. Let me move the lighting in a little bit closer. See if this might help. There we go. We'll turn this on and see if we're able to use centrifugal force to get into there. So now we know we've broken everything loose in there. Now we have to clean it up. Again, you can't just polish it and break that stuff free. Now we have to get in there with some Q-tip swabs and see if we can get that cleaned up better. And again, I would use kerosene. I would use kerosene on this type of cleanup. You can add just a little bit more out here. You can see what we got off there with no effort at all. Now we're going to go inside of here where we were able to get that brush style Dremel and see what kind of junk we can clean out of there as well. That's our first swab right there. And all of you that saw some of those reels on Facebook, you saw how filthy this faceplate area was. If you take a look at it now, you can see that I've gone through and done a thorough cleaning and lubricated all the critical pivot points on there so that we've got a nice fluid motion and we don't lose that energy coming down the main shaft. Look at that. I was applying enough force, I actually broke that one off. We'll go to this other one, see if we can get in there just a little bit more. Okay, I think that's really, really good. So now let's go back to, we've got a nice clean surface now to work with. Now let's see if we can clean up this adjustment plate and get this back into position. Okay. And we can use a variety of tools on this. We can use brushes. We can use dental tools. Again, for sake of time, I'll probably apply that blade style Dremel tool and clean this up, but we'll go over it with a brush to begin with. And I'm going to go back to our copper, kind of go over this a little bit, clean this up. Brushes are nice because they have those long bristles so you can get in these tighter spaces that maybe the Dremel won't even be able to reach. You can see that shine starting to come back now finally. This other side that's really, really yucky looking. Get that cleaned up as well. And this is going to be the plate that's so essential to adjusting the take-up spring on this machine. Depending on the type of thread we're working with, we'll make adjustments to that take-up spring so that we can work with more fragile threads. We can work with heavier threads. And it's going to give us a little bit of an edge in getting that lock stitch defined. So even just using the brush without the Dremel, we've done, I think, a really, really nice job of getting this cleaned up, at least as far as getting the initial phase of cleaning up. Now we'll just kind of go over it with a little bit of Windex, and then we'll get this reinstalled. We could spend a lot more time on this. A lot more time. And I've shown you in other live streams as you're working with these different brushes, kind of like this brush that we just used, you always kind of give it a little bit of a wipe off in between. Make sure that you're getting those bristles cleaned up a little bit. So when you go back to using it on another part of the machine, you're not going to be introducing dirt back to the machine again. And you can do the same thing with your Dremel as well. You just kind of turn it on, get your finger in there and get it nice and tight. And then watch, that was a clean spot of the cloth. Watch all the dirt that we get off of that brush. That way we start with a fresh brush each and every time, and we're not reintroducing dirt to a surface that we're trying to get clean. Now we'll just go over this a little bit with some Windex type material. Windex, again, most Windex products are going to be very safe for chromium parts of the machine. I would not use it on the painted surfaces. I would use sewing machine oil or kerosene. But you can see it does a really good job of getting that stuff off that we broke loose, and it leaves us with a really beautiful shine on that chromium section of the machine. It's kind of part of the eye candy, isn't it? So now we're going to be putting this back in the machine. We put it like this. And it's got a little adjusting screw right here that you can loosen once all the assembly is on there. It's going to lower this platform for the resting place for that take spring. The take-up spring is going to be working with the take-up arm in order to make sure that lock stitch, as that thread is getting pulled up, is maintained with a proper tension. So these two together work as a team along with your adjustment to the tension itself as well. But you can see how it rotates like this, depending on if you want a lot of movement with that take-up spring, or as you rotate it up like this, get even closer. As you rotate it up like this and get down towards the bottom of that, you're going to be reducing that take-up spring motion considerably. So let's find that little screw, and we'll put that screw back in place. Wipe over this screw and get this cleaned up a little bit as well. It's actually surprisingly clean. Check the monitor over there. I think you can see. Yeah, you can see pretty much what I'm doing. Maybe I'll angle the machine just a little bit more. Get this into place. Get that screw in there. And I always put just a little bit of lubricant on that screw just to make it that much easier if any adjustments have to be made to that swing of the take-up spring. So I just put just a tiny little drop of kerosene on there. And some of you might say for general sewing, if you're dealing with polyester, if you're dealing with cotton thread, that sort of thing, where would you recommend adjusting this for the most common type of sewing and the most common type of thread? Probably go right around in the middle. And that's what you probably would have suspected. Go right about in the middle. You've got a range right here from here to here. And we're going to set that screw right in the middle because we're going to be sewing with a polyester thread. And that'll give us just a nice even middle range of that take-up spring. Some people refer to it as a check spring too. I don't know why. If anyone knows why they started calling it a check spring, by all means, type that into the live chat and share that knowledge with us, because I always just refer to it as a take-up spring because the take-up spring works with the take-up arm. The take-up arm is right up here. Okay, got that tight enough. Now our next component to go on the machine is going to be the mounting stem that everything attaches to. And we also put the pin release as well for the presser foot. So we're going to target this now for cleaning, and then we'll install this. I'll show you how to orientate it so that you're set up right away, and you don't have to be concerned about having a center point on that. Let's see if I can show you. You don't have to be concerned about having the proper center point on the plus minus. You'll see some sewing machines where this is way, as my father would have said, cattywampus. If anyone wants to try to spell cattywampus, type it in the live chat. I don't know where my dad came up with that. It must be an Indiana term. But you'll see them, instead of being beautifully centered like that, they'll have them off to the left, to the right. I've seen them on the bottom. And so that way you're a little bit more hard pressed to know where your center point is, along with your numbers as well. They can be way off sometimes, where the 0 is way off to the right. I'll try to show you how to get that nicely centered so you don't have to battle that little beast. And on this one, I use a combination of tools. I use a dental tool to get in here where that release pin is. Make sure there's nothing restricting that. Also, all these little groove points work in there as well to get those nice and clean. These points as well that hold that spring. You can certainly use a Dremel on this as well. Sometimes I do. Also have the opening for the other pin release right over there. I'm going to work this into there. Also, just a quick heads up, sometimes you'll get a machine and these will not be as straight as you can see them right here. One of these will be bent out. Sometimes they're too tight together, so you can't even reassemble this. Just be real careful. These are real light gauge metal, and they can snap off if you try bending them. Usually what I'll do is I'll hit them with a torch and kind of heat them up if I've got to manipulate them, and then I can either squeeze them together, or if you're going to bring them apart, let's say they're too tight, and you go to reassemble your upper tension, you can't even slide this on. It won't even go all the way in. It's too tight. You can heat it up a little bit. And then just use a screwdriver like this to very gently slide it in and to push those apart just enough so you can reassemble that upper tension. Not too far, just enough. All right, let's finish up cleaning this up. Get a little brush out as well, get into some of those grooves. Okay, I think we've done a good job of getting that cleaned up. And if you ever open one of these up and you're hard pressed to try to get that pin out, there's a little pin. I'll show it to you in just a second here. This little pin release right here is going to have one flared edge. It might be kind of hard to see. It's going to have one flared edge that's going to be the part that goes in last so that it doesn't fall out. And then a standard opening over here that's going to be slightly rounded. But if you ever have trouble getting one of these out, when you go to take this apart and clean it yourself, I'll go and put this in temporarily. So there's your pin right there. This is the pin that is pushed in and out when you raise the presser foot lever so that it allows that pressure to come off of those discs. See how it's coming in and out? If you're ever hard pressed to get this out, you can use an awl like this, or if you don't have an awl, you can find an appropriate little nail like this. Just very carefully slide it in, and you can push that pin all the way out so you can get it out. Sometimes they stick. They've got a lot of varnishing on them. and it's hard to get them out of here because you got to clean this too. And you can use either a standard type nail or an awl like this if that's available to you. So we got to clean this pin up as well. And then also we have to lubricate this chamber that the pin moves in. We'll do that first so I don't forget to do that. Put just a little bit of kerosene down this chamber. Now we're going to concentrate on cleaning this up, and I think I will use the Dremel on this. It's always good to go between a field of tools so you can see how these tools, can benefit you. And you might have some of these tools, you might not have some of these other tools. You could also always go to a dental tool like this and work on cleaning this up too. I've certainly done that numerous times. Break loose some of that varnishing and some of that crud that's going to make this a little bit more restricted in how it's able to move in that chamber of the upper tension. We can always go to our polishing Dremel tool as well. I'm going to change the Dremel bit again to that blade style one. And we'll start with a clean surface, make sure that we're not reintroducing dirt. Get a nice clean surface here, and we'll just see what kind of dirt we're going to get off of there. Not too bad. I've already cleaned this one once. Now we're going to go over this little pin. This little pin is so essential. And if you ever find a machine that doesn't have one of these pins, know that they're very specific to the machine. Some are going to be larger in circumference. There'll be different lengths. And so you can't just insert any pin into your upper tension. You want to make sure that it's the appropriate one. And now we'll just wipe over this. You could wipe over this with a little bit of rubbing alcohol, or you could do it with a little bit of the Windex solution as well. And since we haven't used our rubbing alcohol much, I think I'll do that. Grab some of the rubbing alcohol with a Q-tip swab, and we'll just wipe over it. And then we are going to wipe over it with kerosene as a last step, because we want that to have a nice slick surface on it so it's going to move very freely. And I think it was Tim that asked in the last one, is kerosene going to be more effective or rubbing alcohol more effective in stripping, dirt and junk off of things? It really is a mixture of the two. I think I had provided that answer in the last one. Rubbing alcohol is a little bit more caustic, especially 91% proof stuff like I'm using here. 91 proof. Let me see if I can show you the bottle again. This is going to be the upper threshold of rubbing alcohol. There's probably stuff you can buy for hospital settings and other places like that that might even be a higher percentage of isopropyl alcohol, but 91% is really, really up there. So this is going to eat away at stuff very effectively to get it cleaned. And so, if you tend to be a little bit more impatient, a little bit more anxious, you can hit it with the rubbing alcohol first, kind of like I'm doing here, after you polish it up a little bit, and you'll get any of that extra residual stuff off of there. And then certainly then after that, we've already lubricated the well on here. And we're going to also swab over this pin and make sure that that's going to be lubricated as well to work in that chamber real well. And you're just going to insert it in there. Again, the flange, the part that's kind of flared out on top, is going to point up and just going to slide it back in. And we've already lubricated this and that. With a little tap, it should fall back into position usually. There we go. There, it popped back out again. You can see that pin. And then what I usually do is I just kind of bump it a couple of times, make sure that the end of that also has that lubrication all the way down to it. Okay, so now we're at a position where we're ready to reinsert it into the machine. We've already got our take-up spring plate adjusted. It's cleaned. All of that's clean. The well is clean in here. Our presser foot lever should be in the down position right now. And then we're going to go ahead and just reinsert this. I sometimes add a little bit of extra lubricant to the end as well. I didn't do that yet, but I will. Put a little bit more lubricant on the end of this as well, because that's going to slide into a pretty tight space. You want to slide it in there. Again, presser foot down. Just kind of wiggle it until you can feel that it's gotten all the way to the rear. Sometimes they stick just a little bit. And then you want to orientate it so that when we slide our center point on, this one right here, we slide this on, we want it to be nicely centered. Just going to put that on like this. That is kind of snug, even still. I thought we'd opened that up enough, but it still is pretty snug. And also, it'll be really hard for you to see it, but just on the inside, I'm almost at the end of my cord here. On this side, right here, there's going to be a screw that's going to hold this into position. It's going to be just behind this point right here. So you have to go in there with a fairly small screwdriver. You may be able to see it. Grab my smaller screwdriver and we'll go ahead and tighten that up. And then we'll open that up just a little bit more so we can fit that all the way in. And as you're tightening this, make sure that you're applying a little bit of pressure here so that it doesn't potentially pop back out. So I'm tightening that screw on the side. And then I'm also, at the same time, I'm pushing this mounting stem back in. And again, you don't have to ratchet this at a crazy level, but you do want to make it very, very tight. So now we've got a nice center point, and the only thing we have to do is open it up just a little bit more. I thought we had it opened enough, but apparently we don't. So I'm just going to heat it a little bit with a torch. And then very carefully slide this screwdriver in just to open that up just a little bit more. It should be enough, hopefully. I'm just checking this. This isn't going to go on next. There we go. That's nice now. Okay, so now let's target the next part to go on the machine. I was just wanting to check that for a nice center point. Check that for a nice center point and also check it for clearance as well. Yeah, we've got a nice center point on there now. So now we're going to be targeting these. We're going to be targeting the disc, pressure discs, and also our take-up spring. So these 4 parts next are going to be the ones that we're going to be cleaning and then mounting to the machine. And there's also a calibration I'll show you with this spring so you can start out with the right amount of take-up pressure with this take-up spring. That's not going to be excessive. Yeah, let's see. I think we'll probably use our Dremel to clean this. Yeah, just drop my... Hold on a second. That's the problem with magnetic stuff, is I just dropped my spring. I hope it didn't go in the trash. Let's see here. There it is. It's a little bit awkward as you're getting acquainted with a new workshop, a temporary workshop, and you're trying to figure things out as far as working with that new space. So, all in all, it's going pretty smooth. So, we're going to clean this up first. This is going to be our plate that our discs go on, and our take up spring is going to mount to all this. I'll show you how to put all that together. We'll go over this with our brush first and just kind of clean it up a little bit. And this is fairly sturdy, but I would brush it like this so you're not pushing down on it and you might bend it a little bit. Okay, I think we've got that good. These I'm going to actually polish with a Dremel, these discs, because these have to be absolutely like a baby's bottom. They have to be clear of any debris, any burrs, anything like that, because the thread is going to be passing right through here. And it could cause a thread snag. It could cause the thread to break. So I'm going to polish these with a high-speed Dremel, get them nice and tidy, and then we'll go over them. We'll clean all of these with rubbing alcohol and Q-tip swabs to make sure that they're nice and clean. And these we're not going to be lubricating. We're going to have a nice, clean, spick and span surface. There's not going to be any lubricant, just the metal itself, so that there's nothing sticking to it. All right, I'm going to sit back on my chair. I was down on my knees because I had to climb underneath there and look for that spring that I knocked down. Okay. Make sure we're starting clean again. So we'll quickly find a clean spot on the rag right about there. Nice and clean. We'll go over this first. It's pretty good, but I'll just polish it a little bit more. You can go up these discs now. You see right now the discs are not nearly as bad as I've seen with some. This one's a little bit worse off, but it's got that extra varnishing and dirt on there. We want to get all that off so that we've got nothing in there at all that's going to cause that thread to catch up. And this side right now that I'm cleaning is obviously not the side that faces the thread, but it still can contaminate the other side with that dirt moving around. So we'll clean the entire component, make sure that it's nice and tidy, including the edges as well. Now we're going on the important side, the more important side, getting that also cleaned up nicely. Now, springs are really, really tricky when it comes to cleaning them. Springs are very, very tricky. They can get bent very easily. They can get snagged by a power Dremel like this. I'll show you the best way to try to clean them, damaging the spring. And certainly you can do this by hand. You could certainly do it using a dental tool. You could use it very carefully using a brush, but even a brush like this is potentially going to cause some bending of that spring. So let's use the Dremel and I'll try to show you how to use it very carefully. Going to clean off the brush one more time. So what I do first of all for this end right here, it gets inserted into the machine, is I actually pinch it together like this so that you're holding that spring rigid, and then you can go over it and get that cleaned up without it snagging on the Dremel. There's a lot of buildup on there that can retard the movement of this spring, so we're doing our best to try to get that off. This is the real tricky part. Trying to get this section where that thread is going to be resting on there, getting that clean, and trying to do it without the Dremel manipulating this thin little wire. I kind of do it against my finger. All right, now let's go ahead and hit this with some rubbing alcohol. We'll get all that cleaned off. The remaining stuff, and again, you're not going to lubricate any of this. Not even the spring. Do not lubricate it. And then you can take the first one that we just cleaned and put it face down, like so. Okay. Actually, face up. I apologize. I'm thinking backwards. Face up. Face up, not face down. I'm used to doing this from a different angle. Let me clean this off as well. Okay, this one goes face down. So we've got them like this, like a sandwich. We've got the one on the bottom facing up, this one facing down, like so. Now we're going to take this spring. We're going to have to wipe that off as well. Make sure that that's damp already. These Q-tips, they don't stay together very well. Let's see here. Let me grab one more Q-tip. And yes, these are Dollar Tree Q-tips, so I shouldn't expect them to be bulletproof, but okay, so now we're going to take this piece right here, and I'm going to move the camera a little bit. It's the right angle. I'm going to take this piece right here. Again, we've got this assembly right here. We're putting one disc up, the other disc down. And we're taking this spring and we're going to slide it right over this with the larger portion going in towards the machine, towards those little fins that we had to clean before we install it again. So kind of like this. And then we just have to thread it through over this shaft. So I'll try to get a little bit closer. And here's where it gets important. When you get up to this point right here, you've got to thread it on. So I can let go of it right now. It's resting on this shaft. We have to decide how much tension we want on this take-up spring to begin with. The further you rotate it down towards the 6 o'clock position before you bring it back past this little resting point, the more pre-tension it's going to have. That's calibration process. And the calibration process is really essential because it's going to determine how effective you are depending on the type of thread you're working with. If you're working with real delicate threads, you want to calibrate this lighter so that it's not going to be putting as much pressure on that thread as that take-up arm and this spring swing up to pull that thread taut. So right now I've got it almost at the 9 o'clock position, pretty close. If I bring it in like this and I slide it over that little fin, like so, my spring's on the wrong side, but I can fix that by just backing it out slightly and working it around that little resting point. See, I just brought it onto that resting point, and now I can check that take-up spring tension to see how much pressure I have. The ideal pressure is probably about 4 to 7 ounces. It's going to be, it's going to vary. It's going to vary depending on the kind of thread that you're going to be sewing with. For basic polyester, probably a little bit on the higher end. You can get away with it closer to that 7-ounce pressure return where it's going to be springing back. If you're working with a much more delicate thread, you're going to want to lessen that spring return considerably. I think right now we're right in the middle of the road, probably around 5 ounces. So we're going to leave it just like that. And the only other consideration is if we're working with more delicate thread, then we're going to loosen this little screw again right here. And we're going to bring this up so that it's not going through as much range of motion. The more range of motion, in other words, the more we lower this down, the more it's going to be pulling on that thread, the more likely it is to break that thread. So you have to be real mindful of that when it comes to working with the tension factor and calibrating it. Yeah, I think that's really good. So the next part we're going to put on is going to be this part right here, the one that we wanted to make sure would clear that end of that stem, because these little things they kind of get tight together because we're screwing this on and compressing these, and over time that metal gets a little bit weaker and it'll actually close that opening, and that's where you have to heat it up and very carefully try to fan those out a little bit more if it's too tight. So we'll clean this now. Use a little bit of Windex on that, I think. This is generally not going to be super filthy. And get one of our Q-tip swabs. Get on the inside as well, where that other spring is going to be resting. We have one other calibration point to show you that you might have to adjust on your machine. And that was a lot dirtier than we suspected, isn't it? That way we don't reintroduce dirt again to all this other clean assembly that we've already gone through to get all set up. So once we've cleaned over it, now we can slide it on. You're going to slide it with this open cup end facing out because that's where our spring is going to rest. I'm going to slide it in now. Yeah, I would say we've got that pretty well centered. Pretty well centered. If you ever get it to this stage and it's just a little bit off, you can always loosen that side screw and then just carefully rotate this slightly to get even a better center point. But I'd say we're pretty spot on. So now we got our compression spring. This is what's really going to give us the pressure against those discs to maintain that lock stitch. That's what our upper tension does, is it maintains the tension to pull up to define that lock stitch. These also over time will get compressed a little bit. And sometimes we have to fan them out just a little bit to get a little bit better tension out of them so we can maintain tension better. First of all, we'll clean it. And you can certainly use a Dremel on these. I've gotten careless a couple of times where I'm distracted by something and I'll use a Dremel. And if the Dremel catches this in the right way, it will launch it. And then all of a sudden you're searching around trying to find this spring somewhere on the floor. So if you use a Dremel, really get a tight grip on there and hang on to it so that it doesn't fly off. And when you're like this, just go in between those little grooves. Rotate it. I don't recommend using this type of attachment on the inside of here because it's likely to grab the edge and flip it onto your hand. So what I'm going to do on it, the inside of here, is I'm just going to go ahead and clean it with a brush. And we'll clean over this with rubbing alcohol as well. We're not going to be adding any lubricant to this spring either. Now we're going to just do a little bit of a calibration on this, very, very minor calibration. And that is, again, because this will lose its effectiveness over time because it starts to lose, almost like as we get older, we start to shrink, don't we? As we get older, we start to shrink and we get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. So we've got to do the equivalent of stretch this out a little bit, but we've got to do it very carefully because these springs do have a breaking point. So I'm going to slide a screwdriver in over here, going to heat it up a little bit. I'm going to slide another screwdriver right over here. Making sure it's not too hot to touch. And we'll just apply a little bit of pressure to stretch this out. And you may not be able to see it, but we just lengthened this spring by probably a good millimeter, and that can make a big difference. So now we're going to insert it, and you insert it so that it looks like an E. Don't insert it like this, upside down, because then the spring is not going to flex in its normal direction. Go ahead and slip it in like this with the E shape. If you can see, it's an E symbol. Let's slide that in. This little piece here is the next one we're going to add. It's going to allow us to lock it in and to change positions. Kind of goes in front of the spring like that. But first of all, we'll just go ahead and clean over it. This one I should be able to do okay with the Dremel, I think. And we've already got these dampened with some rubbing alcohol. So now I'm going to go over this with rubbing alcohol and clean this off. And when you install this, the finger will be pointing out towards you. Make sure you put it on correctly with the little finger pointing out. And this is also a nice little circular plate here, so that as you increase the pressure, it's going to push down on that spring evenly, so that you got an even pressure across that spring on the machine. See that? Now our next piece is going to be our numbered portion, so we know where our tension is at. And this one usually, because it's so outside of the machine, it doesn't get too dirty, but I'm still going to swab over it with some rubbing alcohol and just get any dirt off of there that might be stuck on. And it'll be hard to see it, but inside there's just a tiny little stopper. It's built into this piece, a tiny little stopper. It's like a little fin that pushes up right about here. You're able to see it in the shot. It's on the inside. Let's see if I can get that camera right. Where's my little flashlight? Little flashlight. Oh, there it is. Maybe if I go like this, you'll be able to see it. It's just going to be a little fin. It's on the inside track of there. The significance of the fin is it's going to be your 0 point. That little fin right there. It's really hard to see, I know, but that's going to be your 0 point. Maybe you can see it like that. Yeah, you can kind of see it. I'm looking over at the laptop. You can kind of see it. So when you put this on, you've got to make sure that that 0 point is just a little bit to the right, of our center point. So when I put it on and I slide it on like this, that 0 on here is going to be just a little bit to the right of our center point. So here's our 0. There's a dirty, let me do it like this. Here's our 0. Here's our center point. So this is going to be just a little bit to the right of that center point, so that that little stopper, when you bring this back to 0, it can't go any further. So I'm going to set that right there. First of all, we have to clean our last part. This right here, this is going to be our adjuster. So we're going to clean over that as well. And this is the only part that we're going to be putting back on with some lubrication. I'm going to put a little bit of lubrication on these threads. So I'm going to get my kerosene. Actually, I can use this. It's probably even going to be a little bit easier. Use this. We'll put just a little bit of lubrication on the inside of those threads. Now here's where it requires a little bit of coordination. You're going to put this piece on again. You're offsetting the 0. Check my camera angle. You're offsetting the 0 from the center point. And now we have to push this in just a little bit. We have to compress this just a little bit against that spring. And then we have to add our adjuster on to the equation. There we go. So I'm going to make sure I hold that into position. And then depending on how many times I turn this adjuster before I release it and allow it to lock into place will be the second phase of calibrating the upper tension. The more I compress this in and turn this in before I allow it to lock in place, the more pre-tension you're going to have on this upper tension. In other words, the 1 will have the equivalent of 2 on other upper tensions because they didn't turn this in as far. So if I start right here and I kind of depress it, give it a turn, give it another turn. See, I stop there because I have to check my range. So I'm going to let go of it now. Yeah, it's a little bit, not quite enough because this is coming apart from there. A little bit more. Now I'm going to let it go. Listen for the click. Just heard a little click in place. There we go. Clicked in place. So now that little pin that we had facing at the front of the spring out, remember the one I said should point towards you, is now locked in here. And we can turn it either way, all the way down to 0, or we can turn it, make sure we can get all the way up to 9 with it. Because sometimes you'll over calibrate it. In other words, if we're over here and we decide, no, I want a little bit more tension, I just push this little ring right here, push it in, and then I can turn this further. See that? I just gave it another click. You just sort of click into place. Make sure I can get all the way up to 9. All the way back down to 0. Yeah, that should be pretty good. Now, I might get overly zealous. I might decide to go a little bit further. I'm like, no, I want more tension is better. So I'm going to push this little ring in. I have to kind of do it with a slightly different angle. Push this little spring in, and I might give it even more of a turn. I've got to reach around the back of the camera. I can't quite do it. There we go. I'm going to give it even more of a turn. See me going? All the way over to there. And then I'll release it. But if you go too far, then you can't get all the way up to 9 because there's too much pre-tension on that spring that's hidden inside of here. We try to turn it here. I can only get up to 8. So then I have to say, well, I've gone too far. I've got to go back to here, and I've got to take just a little bit of that tension away. So then I'm going to go counterclockwise. I'm going to push this little ring in. I'm going to bring this back counterclockwise, like so. Let it go. Get it to lock into place. And then I can make it all the way up to 9 again. Well, what I've seen some people do is they don't put enough pre-tension on it. They can get up to 9 in a lickety split, but then because there's not enough pre-tension that we're adjusting right now, because there's not enough pre-tension in order to operate the machine and maintain proper tension balance, they've got to be all the way up almost to 8. Almost all the way up to 8 in order to do it. A nice range on one of these machines is going to be somewhere between 5 and 7. So if you find that you're operating and you've got to crank this all the way up to 8 to get proper balance with the top stitch and the lock stitch, then you probably don't have enough pre-tension set on this. That's where you can go back down to 0. You can push that little ring in, turn this a little bit clockwise, and then all of a sudden you'll be able to adjust it down to 7 and you'll get the same results, or maybe all the way down to 6. So hopefully that's helpful. This is a calibration point. We talked about the calibration of the take-up or the check spring, and we also talked about the calibration of the range of motion for the check spring as well when we adjust this little screw here, and we can lower that platform down or raise that platform up. Again, the higher the platform, when you loosen that screw, if you push this and this little spring, you see it going up, that's going to reduce the range of motion, and it's not going to create as much stress on that thread. So if you're working with a more delicate thread, that's the adjustment you'll make in order to have success in sewing with it without constantly having to re-thread the machine again. So that's it. We just did it. And now the last check we do is we just raise our presser foot, make sure that we see those discs release properly. And we're getting a good response from that. But we're not getting the ideal response, and I'll show you why. It's another opportunity to show you something else real quick. We're not getting the ideal response because I don't have a spring on here right now. You see that? There's no spring. I have to push on it to create a spring effect. Ha-ha! We'll look at that real quick. Let me see if I can find the spring, and I'll show you why I took it off. And it's in part because there's areas to clean underneath there as well. So when you're servicing this area of the faceplate, you'll notice this is what normally would be covered by the spring. This is our presser foot bar. This was absolutely caked with crud and muck and everything else on there. Now you can see all of these faceplate components are spick and span. They've also been pre-lubricated as well already. And the thing, if you decide to take this spring off of here, realize right on the top of it, there's a tiny little washer that this is going to screw against, very much like I showed you when that little pin slider is over the spring in the upper tension, so that it creates that even push on the spring. That's what this does too. It creates that even push across this spring as it's being depressed, and you're increasing or decreasing presser foot pressure. Instead of this screwing against this, it pushes against this washer, and then it pushes it down very, very evenly. But the thing you have to watch for is when you're taking this out, I'm going to put it back in real quick. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to clean the spring, and then I'll put it back in, because right now the spring is kind of still nasty looking. It's really quite nasty. So let's just go over this real quick, and then we'll put this back in, and then we'll get a proper response from that upper tension. And I usually do this with a Dremel as well. It takes a little bit more hand skill, but you'll get it down. Just hold on real tight and get into all those little grooves. Actually go in a circle. It's kind of fun. Ha-ha! That was fun. All right, we'll wipe over it with a rag, and then I'll show you how to adjust this too, because this has to be adjusted over time also. Yeah, let's see here. Grab another rag. Just a little bit of Windex. You could use kerosene on this also, so that it doesn't develop any rust on it. We'll probably apply just a little bit of kerosene to it. Get it nice and clean. Where was our kerosene? There it is. Take a little bit of kerosene, and we'll go over a swab. That one's got rubbing alcohol, so I think I'll grab some clean ones. And we'll go over the shaft first of all. And even though I've cleaned this several times, take a look. See that? Dirt does migrate on your sewing machine. It can start on one end and work its way all the way to the other end. Very, very easily. We'll slide that spring in, and then we'll add a little bit of lubricant to the spring as well. So I'm going to slide that into place. We'll add just a little bit of extra lubricant to it so that it's going to move and compress more easily. But you know what I want to do first, though? Let me show you one other thing before I do that. Just like that other spring that we made an adjustment on, this one also over time can also get compressed. It gets, squished, stretched, squished, stretched. And over time, it loses a little bit of its height. So this one we can also add a little bit of length to. Again, you have to be real careful with these. They can break. They can break. Just heat it up just a little bit. Whoops. Let me go with the wider one for that end. Get it down to a reasonable temperature, but it's still going to be heated on the inside. And then we'll go about 2 bumps in, and we'll just gently give it a little bit of a stretch. See that? It can slide off. Watch out. I was actually trying to not get burned. There we go. That stretched out very, very nicely. Very nicely. And that way we don't have to crank up that pressure foot pressure quite as hard, do we? Now we can slide that back in, giving it a little bit more length. Now we have to get that magical little ring that a lot of people will take this apart and they'll have this in the up position, the pressure foot lever, and that little thing will go bing. And then you're searching all over the place for it, saying, where did that thing go? And these are really tricky because they're incredibly thin, but they got a very big inner circumference to fit over the pressure foot bar. So you can't generally find them very easily by going to your local hardware store. And then we're going to carefully from here, see if I can show you, kind of slide it onto here and then just slide it into place. You just slide it and it'll drop back down right on top of there. And we have to do some quick cleaning up on this. And if you've ever gotten a sewing machine where you'll try to adjust the pressure foot pressure and it's almost like it's fused, it's cemented, because no one's ever taken time to clean the threads on these. That's what we're doing right now, is just getting some of that crud out of the threads so that you'll be able to turn it very, very easily and adjust it without any, major muscle. And we'll go over this initially with a little bit of Windex type product. Get all that extra junk off of there. Twisting it into those threads to pull any of that stuff that we broke free off. So we've got a nice, clean pressure foot adjuster. Also going to swab the inside real quick with a Q-tip swab, a little bit of kerosene, because we're going to want that to be nice and slick for that bar to go up and down and to not get caught on anything that's going to slow it down. So we'll just put a little bit of this down that chamber, a little bit on the threads as well. And again, when you put kerosene on, you're not going to be able to wipe it all off, which you don't want to do. You want to leave a little bit of residue of that kerosene on there so that it'll continue to have a lasting effect and keep this free moving and easy moving and be able to do its job very, very nicely. So now with the presser foot lever down, you can see our lever is down right now. Presser foot lever down. And you might have to pop this back into place. Right now, this is stuck in the up position because there's no spring to push it down. So kind of grab it like this. See how I just pulled it down? Now we can add our presser foot adjuster. Kind of get it screwing into place. And again, the more you crank this down, the more pressure you're going to have, which means that it's going to be able to handle the heavier materials. If you're dealing with more delicate materials, you're going to back it off. Heavier, lighter. Okay. Get a nice medium, and you can check it as you go just by raising this just slightly. This presser foot lever, just raising it slightly. You can feel how much tension is on there. It's a nice medium range. And before we did this service and stretched this spring a little bit, to get the same amount of presser foot pressure, I was having to screw this almost all the way down. And now look at how much left we have because we're able to optimize this and get the full benefit of that spring again. So that should be really good right now. And now when we apply the presser foot pressure, we can see that it's popping out and it's releasing our tension. We can see our discs moving here. So we know we reassembled this properly. We reassembled this. This has all been serviced. I can pretty much at this point, I can button all this up, put our faceplate back on, and this will be good to go. The only thing I might do is I might just add one more drop of oil here, one more drop of oil there on the needle bar itself. So I think we've covered this machine enough. I've shown you a lot on this machine. I hope it's helpful. And now what we're going to do is we're going to move over to the machine that's finished and actually do a little bit of sewing on it. And then I'll finish this machine, and hopefully I'll be able to present this machine that's going to be going back to Carol in the Madison, Wisconsin area on my next trip. My next trip back to Oconto, I'll try to coordinate a meeting with her and give this machine back to her so that she doesn't have to have it shipped or something like that. So, all right, let's go to the other machine. Bye-bye to Carol's machine, and we'll head back over to this one now. And you can see this one right here. I've done a little bit of cleanup on the paint, not a huge amount. I'll probably go over it a little bit more before I ship this machine off. But I don't have all of my cleaning materials with me here, so I'm a little bit more limited. A little bit more limited. And cleaning is something I do just as a courtesy. I obviously don't charge for it. I don't charge the customer for cleaning up their machine, the patina and that. So, all right. Did we already look up the date of this machine? Was it from the 1950s, right? Or something like that? Does anyone want to look it up again real quick? If anyone's willing to look it up again real quick, we'll go ahead and I'll give you the serial number. Actually, I can type it into the live chat. I think that was Facebook notification. So the serial number, I'll type it in the live chat. Someone wants to go ahead and look it up. Just wiping over some of the dirt. Some of the old varnishing. And the clear coat is actually compromised on this machine. The customer didn't want to have it re-clear coated, so a little bit of damage on here too. but I can tidy it up a little bit with this oil. There we go. Just a little bit of oil will also soften the paint a little bit if it's getting more brittle, and will make that paint last longer and stay good looking longer too. Whoops, I just knocked all my sew-offs off. Like I said, I'm not used to this temporary space yet. I'm trying to get adapted to it, but it takes a while, doesn't it? So you can see I just did a little bit of cleanup on the patina. Just a little bit of cleanup using an oil kerosene mix, Q-tip, and a cotton swab, and then you can wipe off the excess so it doesn't get on the material. But it really does an excellent job of taking the dirt out, wicking the dirt out, and then also it does a great job of softening the paint so that it doesn't crackle as much. Got crackling here already, you can see that. And that's a clear coat issue, but the customer didn't want me to address that, so that's fine. This is going to be a working machine, not necessarily a prom queen. So okay. Oh, I was going to type in the serial number. That's right. Let me do that real quick. J. Okay, I think I did it correctly. It should say AJ345887. Also, you might remember I was showing you in the last live stream this badge mark here that was really nasty looking and really cruddy. And you can see through a very careful polishing process, I was able to bring the beauty back of that badge mark. It really is one of the first things that people notice on the sewing machine. And also did a little bit of cleaning up on the serial plate as well. But that really makes a big difference in how the customer feels as well when they sit down to the machine. If it's got that little bit of extra sparkle and pizzazz, they just feel better sitting down with that machine, don't they? And it just makes them feel better about the sewing process as well. Okay, so let me see if I can do this. I think I heard the phone go. I'm just going to see if there's any messages to respond to real quick. Yeah, so if anybody wants to look up that serial number, that would be awesome. Just confirm the birth date of this machine that's going to be heading back to Nevada very shortly. Heading back to Nevada very shortly. Get that back into place as well. Yeah, I'm just going to send a quick text to somebody. They had a question. Let me see if I can do this real quick. Well, I hope everybody has found this part of the live stream helpful so far as I walked you through some of the steps on Carol's machine. I don't know that there's a lot of YouTube videos out there showing people how to properly clean and calibrate and assemble, disassemble the upper tension on these machines. So hopefully that's something that you found that will be helpful to you as you sit down to your 201 or Singer type upper tension as many of them do, to easily do it on a machine other than the 201-2 also. So yeah, you can transplant it however it works for you. I'm answering one text and I just got another text. I think it was from Emma. I might have given the wrong serial number. Let me see if I might have typed it in wrong. Let me see if I messed it up. I might have messed it up. So the serial number for the one that we're looking at right here is A like Apple, J like Juliet, 345887. 345887 with the double letter prefix of AJ. Apple Juliet. Apple Juliet 345887. 345. Yep, 345887. Just double, triple checking. I think it was Emma that just said she got a Model 66 when she looked it up or something. What did I type into the live stream? AJ. Oh, I did type in the wrong one. I put an 8 instead of a 3. Yeah, so that H should be a 3 at the beginning of the serial number that I typed in. Oops. Sorry about that. No, you got it right, Emma. I got it wrong. That 8 should have been a 3. I don't know. It does look a little bit like an 8 when you're looking at it with this lighting right here. I won't offer that as an excuse, but just an apology. Okay. Well, we'll find out shortly. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Serial number you gave is for the Singer Model 66. Well, you know what? That's appropriate, isn't it? Because remember, the Model 201 took over for the Model 66. I still got it wrong, though, didn't I? I still got it wrong. Yeah, and we didn't talk about that in the live stream yet, but we, the reality is when it comes to the 201-2, it had big shoes to fill, didn't it? The 66 had been around since around 1902, and the 201 was on the scene right around 1935, and yeah, but it really did. I think it did an excellent job. They did an excellent job of choosing a machine that would get the job done. So, yeah, choose a machine that would get the job done. Okay, so let me do this. Let me actually sew with a sewing machine during this live stream. Wouldn't that be cool? And I've already done some pre-sewing on this machine. I did a charcoal colored 100% cotton, which I thought was really kind of cool. Charcoal color. I don't think I've ever used charcoal before. Some additional charcoal stitching on this one. And then some of this material that Susie gave me. It was from a quilting square that she didn't need, I believe. And she gave me a little bit extra of the cloth that I could use in the live stream because I'm absent most of my materials. And then I decided to be really goofy. And Susie also gave me some packing paper. It's like a thin packing paper. And I thought, wouldn't that be fun to stitch? And the machine loved it. This 201 just loved stitching this packing paper. This, believe it or not, this is 16 layers. 16 layers of this packing paper that I went through with this 201. And we'll try to duplicate that again in the live stream. You can tell right away what the lock stitch is. You can see that part coming through almost like a bullet with that needle. Yeah, a lot of fun. It's fun to try sewing on different materials, isn't it? It's fun to try sewing on different materials. So let's get this machine to work so that we've got confidence that she's ready to head back to Nevada. And then we'll wrap this live stream up. And on the next one, I'll be prepared to demonstrate more on the foot controller, which is something Teresa and Tim wanted to see from Thorpe, Wisconsin. So we'll check that one out too. So, all right. So let's see here. I've got some of this. I don't know what kind of denim it is, but this came from a pair. I had no denim, and there's not a lot of thrift stores near this temporary workshop. And Susie sacrificed a pair of her old denim slacks or denim jeans to give me this denim so I would have something to sew on, because all I had at that point was cotton and packing paper. It was pretty sad, but but I'll try sewing on some of this as well. This is a pretty heavy denim. I'm not sure what kind of denim it is, but it's got some definite definite strength to it. We'll see how this 201 does with that. I'll go down a simple, see, what should I do? I'll fold it like this, and we'll go down these 4 layers, and then I'll fold it again. Let's see, what would that put us at? Would I be able to get that underneath the presser foot? Maybe not. Yeah, I can. So let's see, 2, 4. Yeah, we'll do 4 layers, and then we'll go up to 6 layers is what I'll do. That'll be our 4-layer sew off, not a light sew off at all. And then we'll add these other 2. I'll kind of fold it over once we look at the stitching. I'll fold it over, and then we'll go up to 6 layers of denim with this 201. That's not really the toughest challenge I've ever put a 201 through. I put them through a lot tougher challenges than that. Okay. So I always say it, make sure your take-up arm right here is at the highest position. I've got this 201 calibrated pretty much the same way we had the other one that we just did down on the other end of the workbench. So we've got about the same presser foot pressure. We got the same spring return. We've got the same pre-tension on here. So we'll see how this machine does, hopefully with very, very minor adjustments, if any. All right. And I'll be stitching somewhere between 6 to 7 stitches per inch. Real quick about the setup, which I didn't cover. My go-to needle, Schmetz 9014 universal needle, is what we're sewing with. Camera's having a little bit of trouble. Let's see if it does it there. There we go. So a 9014 needle, and then I'm sewing with the Dual Duty XP Coates and Clark thread. And then when you're setting this machine up to sew, I should cover that real quick. When you're setting this machine up to sew, you want to make sure when you insert the needle, make sure that the flat side is to the left. The flat side needs to be to the left. And then you're going to be threading this machine all the way down, and you're going to be threading the needle from right to left. So flat side to the left, which means the hook is coming past the scarf on the left side. And then we're threading it from right to left. Threading on the machine is real straightforward. I'll just give you a quick little glimpse. We're coming off the top, thread guide right there. Make sure your presser foot is in the up, presser foot lever is in the up position. You're threading it through the discs right here. You have to take it through the take-up spring and then draw this up so that it settles in that little notch right there. It settles in that little notch. Then you're going to thread from right to left through the take-up arm right here, down through the faceplate through that thread guide. There's another thread guide right there. Let me shut this light off for a moment. Thread guide right there. Thread guide right there on the right side, just above the needle. And then finally, you're going to be threading the needle from right to left. Okay. I know I did that kind of quick, but you can watch it again, or